Hey guys, Pawnce here on the PBE. When's the last time you heard me say that? Here to talk to you guys about League of Legends Classic, what characters are currently available for testing on the test server, and which characters I think will be released sooner rather than later, and what roles I think Riot will probably end up prioritizing. So let's get a little bit of groundwork out of the way first before we move into things. This is not an exhaustive list where I read over every single character. That's available kind of on the side of the screen here, which we'll sort of reference, but also in the description below if you want to look at what is there. It's also not meant to be an argument about which character belongs where. To quickly address this, the listings and numbers that I have are based off of where things were mostly played at the time, because it's, there's no specific time, but in early Classic League era. Based on how I remember it and what I remember Riot saying and where they technically wanted things to be, and sort of that kind of thing. But again, there's wiggle room, so the numbers might be 1 or 2 off in each category depending on where you want to slide things or how you define things, but they're more or less correct. Yeah, anyway, currently in League, there are, you can follow along here on the side of the screen, 15 top laners. I don't know why it says top there, let's get rid of that. 15 top laners, 16 mid laners, 11 junglers, 9 AD carries, and 9 supports. In terms of unreleased characters between beta period and up to Yasuo, because I believe, I could be wrong on this, but I believe Riot doesn't want to release anything Yasuo forward, because I think that's when Season 4 starts, is 15 top laners. Again, numbers are iffy, we'll talk about that in a minute. 19 mid laners, 11 junglers, 7 AD carries, well, it's 7 or 8, that's a fuzzy number, and 2 dedicated supports. Support probably has the most wiggle room because there are multiple things that go somewhere actually, but Riot wanted them to go somewhere else. Again, we'll talk about that in a minute. So as you can see, actually it's fairly even in terms of unreleased stuff versus stuff that's been put in the game, but certain roles, aka top lane and mid lane, just have the most, both in terms of unreleased and things that already exist in the game. So I'm reasonably confident, well, I can't be reasonable because I don't know Riot's logic, but I feel like it's, if you had to bet, probably AD carry and support will be most prioritized. Really the only cheat thing is I think I read somewhere that Riot does want to add in Graves, so I think this is a issue-in. But yeah, if we're going to talk about things that I think are going to make it in quickly, it's probably going to be something like Graves, Caitlyn, and then maybe Draven. There's just not a lot to pick from early AD carries. We can scroll all the way down here. Like, the list is, yeah, it's just not very long. Note that Urgot is actually added here, and I added the oldest 2 AD carries to get added in that I think they're going to get added. I think it's a fairly safe way of thinking about it. Urgot was, I believe, technically added in as an AD carry at the time, even though he was actually better as a mid laner. I think people still played him a lot as an AD carry, but I thought he was terrible in the role. Well, not terrible, but he was just like really, really good as an oppressive mid laner. Like, he was so oppressive that you landed 1 E in the mid lane versus a mage and you won the lane. And like, it was game over. But this is not a history lesson on old characters. Let's not get into that too much. There's time. We can do that in another video. Next is, again, most likely support, because there's just not that many of them in game at the moment. Even though, again, there's the most wiggle room for what you consider a support or what you can play as a support. In fact, that is so extreme in the case of the support that I'm actually going to list Nautilus, who I don't even have listed as something that is a support. It's the only case I'm doing that. Because originally, I do believe Nautilus was technically supposed to be a jungler. He just ended up being a support almost immediately, and I was like one of the few holdouts in early league that just kept playing him as a jungler because I thought he was fine there, and I liked the playstyle, and I enjoy having a hook while not playing a support. But anyway, that's sort of my guess there. There's just like not a lot to work with. Honorable mention to Zyra also may be a possibility. Zyra was really weird. I actually don't remember whether she was meant to be an AD, or not AD carry, a support or a mid. I know she was flopped around both roles early on a lot, and that changed based on how her numbers were. So I don't really want to speculate on it too much because it's, yeah, where Zyra goes is largely based on what her numbers are doing at the time. Okay, so next, junglers. I'm going to say Udyr, Nocturn, and Hecarim are, to me, feel like likely candidates. Udyr because he's a very old character. I think he's the oldest character not listed in the current roster. Nocturn, because he feels just very ye old, and he's kind of got a fairly, I guess, iconic ult, like the whole darkness thing. I think people associate Nocturne with old League and his ult more than a lot of the other possibilities. And Hecarim too. Hecarim just feels like sort of a staple, fairly old jungler, just not like the oldest possible. Now, for top lane and mid lane, I think we're probably not going to see as many for a while, in just for the interest of, I don't know, balancing out the numbers. But then again, Riot might not want to balance out the numbers because, you know, old League of Legends, as far as I can remember, was fairly top and mid lane heavy for quite some time. I don't know if it made them the most money or what, particularly mid lane. But in any case, let's talk about top lane a bit here. Shen's a bit of a weird one because he early on was played support. Hard to remember. It depends on what version of Shen they're going to release, but he's been like shunted around top, jungle, and support quite a bit. But I do remember early on a lot of top lane Shen, and you'd put him top lane and he would warp down bottom lane with his ult kind of thing. Next, I think Renekton is a fairly he's like a proto Juggernaut. I think before they had the term Juggernaut, before they're using it, he's just kind of a solid top lane staple that people associate with old League, I think. So it wouldn't surprise me to put him in there, although he's got a lot of fame, so I don't know. Again, numbers question. I don't want to really talk about balance numbers and stuff because Riot can kind of do what they want. And again, Riven is another, I think, character that people really associate with top lane, is sort of your archetypal fightery, I'm going to get in there and spam the crap out of stuff top lane. And I think fits into League fairly easily. I think people probably remember her quite a bit because she was so dominant for so long, just in terms of pure numbers. But again, Riot can do whatever they want with numbers, so I don't think it's worth speculating there. Now, in terms of mid lane, I feel like because there are so many mid lanes, there are so many mid lane options. You might not see another mid lane for a while, unless it's some of the fairly old mid laners that it feels a bit conspicuous if they're not there. But the thing like old Mordekaiser, I don't know how many of you guys remember old Mordekaiser, but he was weird. But he also definitely felt like that kind of old, clunky, somewhat janky, doesn't make a lot of sense League. So if Riot is looking to recreate that sort of feeling for people and playing, Morde, I think, kind of belongs in there. Vlad, to an extent, too. I know he was also, early on, he was played both top and mid, and that probably continued on to Modern League, as far as I know. But Vlad is very simple. He just was fairly popular early on. All his sustain might be problematic for the game, I don't know, but sustain always is. I think Vlad's a fairly likely option. Same with Akali, old Akali. Now, I don't remember if old Akali was played more mid or top, but I recall her being in the mid lane a lot, but she was also swapped top sometimes. So again, that's the kind of, tomato, tomato, which role are we doing thing. I don't want to get into that too much, but I think Akali, one way or the other, is a fairly likely, candidate to make it into the game. It also depends on just how Riot's doing, or rather how they want to release their characters. That I don't know. I don't know if they want to release them piecemeal, one or two at a time, or if they're just going to do a huge batch where everything's released all at once. So it's possible they might release all of these, or everything that's unreleased all at once, which seems unlikely. I don't think they'll do that. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on the matter. I don't know. The other thing I don't know is whether or not they intend to release more in the PB for testing between now and live, which I think is going to happen at the end of this month, July, I think. But yeah, for those of you interested, the description below the video will contain this list I have here. Again, if you want to move something around, I probably wouldn't, unless it's something really weird. I will understand where you're coming from with a lot of these. So don't consider to say this belongs here, kind of authoritative list or anything. It's just there is a logic behind why things are listed the way they are. Particularly if there's an asterisk, those are very extreme cases where, yes, it does either end up playing somewhere else, or Riot wanted it somewhere else, or there's some reason for it. So watch for any kind of asterisk character. And again, I realize the support list is very small, but there is the most overlap between that and other roles. So yeah, anyway, I don't want to make this video too long. I don't actually know how long I've been talking, but thanks for hanging out. There'll be more videos to come. Of course, I've been streaming this, well, not every day, but I'll continue streaming League of Legends Classic either here on YouTube or over on my Twitch channel. I dual stream to both if you're interested in hanging out, twitch.tv/Pawnce. And ideally, I will be here every morning, Pacific Standard Time, starting somewhere kind of around like 8 or 9 in the morning, my time. Whatever time zone you're in, you'll have to convert from there. But I'm PST, West Coast, North America. Anyway, that's it. That's it for me. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you guys around. Goodbye.